Hello, and welcome to the Illinois LawCast, a podcast about the wisdom, wit, and curiosity of the University of Illinois College of Law. I'm your host, Chris Davies, and my guest for this episode is Juan Thomas. A 1996 graduate of the College of Law, Dr. Thomas is of counsel for Quintaros, Prieto, Wood, and Boyer, and founder and principal of the Thomas Law Group. In his nearly 30-year career, he has been honored many times for his dedication to the profession and passion for education and community service. The recipient of 5 degrees, including 2 from Illinois as well as a Doctor of Ministry, Dr. Thomas has introduced a new course, The History of the African American Lawyer in the United States, as an adjunct professor this semester. Our conversation touches on these topics and more. I hope you enjoy it. Dr. Juan Thomas, thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's start with your story, your biography, and go way back to the days when you were considering what career you wanted. What drew you towards the law?
Well, Chris, that's a funny story. When I was about 9 years old, there's this guy named Jimmy Carter who was the president of the United States. We just buried him a few weeks ago, right? Well, he was the last president on a group of presidential trivia cards that my parents bought me for either Christmas or my birthday that year. And so I had George Washington through Jimmy Carter, 1979. And as I started to read those cards and read those bios of the former presidents, I noticed that they were either farmers or lawyers. And I had asthma. And as a kid, I would go down to my grandfather's farm in Mississippi, a small town called Holly Springs, Mississippi, and I would always get sick. And so my mother and my father and myself, we figured out real quick I was not going to be a farmer. And so I looked at those cards and said, I want to be the first Black president because none of these guys looked like me. So I figured if I can't be a farmer, I've got to be a lawyer because about half, if not more, of our early presidents were lawyers. And so I decided wanted to focus on becoming a lawyer and wanted to be the first Black president. Barack Obama beat me to it. I'm still a little annoyed about that, but that's okay. He was one of our great presidents. But that's how it started out. And so as a kid, I was involved in student government. In 8th grade, I ran for student council president at my junior high in my hometown of Aurora, Illinois. I won that election. And in high school, I was in student council class president. And the highlight of my senior year in high school, I became president of the Illinois Association of Student Councils, which was the association of all the state student councils across the state of Illinois. And I was the state president my senior year in high school. And so leadership and kind of being in positions where decisions are being made, and that's what a lot of what lawyers do, and advocacy and debating was always kind of what I was more talented at than being an athlete or being a musician. I played the trumpet in high school and early college. I tried to play basketball. I went out for the football team one year in junior high. I found out real quick I don't like pain. And so those pursuits became less and less important to me. And I became more and more involved in leadership activities, student council, and things of that nature. And that was ultimately spurred my interest to become a lawyer.
Now, when you're looking at schools back then, was there something about Illinois that drew you? Was it about leadership skills or something like that?
Well, let me tell you what drew me back to Illinois. I went to college in Atlanta at Morehouse College, which is a African-American male institution that is devoted to developing Black male excellence in leadership in all facets of our society. And I was drawn to Morehouse in large part because I grew up in a kind of a suburban Chicago environment, not around a lot of African-American students. I went to a Black church as a kid in Aurora, but my involvement was with a lot of Caucasian classmates. And my family, particularly my father, thought I needed an African-American experience for college. And he kind of, how would I say it? He prickled my interest because he knew I liked to travel. And so my parents said, well, we'll pay for you to go visit schools if they're HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. And so I chose 3, Howard, Hampton, and Morehouse. To make a long story short, I fell in love with Morehouse because when I went to the campus, the tour guide, who was the junior class president at the time, a guy named Otha Thornton, who later became a mentor and a big brother to me, took me to a classroom of African-American male students talking about and debating constitutional law in front of an African-American male professor. And coming from suburban Chicago, being often the only African-American student in my class, only seeing groups of African-Americans at church on Sunday, I was drawn to want to be in that conversation, to be around a group of students that looked like me, with a professor who looked like me, and having a rigorous, thoughtful, engaging conversation and debate. And I was hooked. And so that's why I went to Atlanta. But what brought me back to Illinois was my senior year at Morehouse. I woke up one March morning, March of 1992, and an African-American female lawyer had just won the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate seat in Illinois. It was the first time a U.S. senator had lost his seat in a primary election. His name was Alan Dixon. Her name was Carol Moseley Braun. And I said, if this African-American woman has got a shot to go to the U.S. Senate, I want to be part of that in my home state. And so I graduated, came back to Illinois, got involved in her campaign, got involved in other Democratic Party politics, and got to go to the Democratic Convention that summer. It was in New York. This was the Clinton-Gore cycle. So Clinton was the Democratic Party nominee. Of course, he beat President Bush that year, that fall. And so that brought me back to Illinois. And then when I went to go to law school, I looked at schools all around the state, of course, and I was kind of wanting to come back here and start my, quote, political career because I was excited about what Carol Braun had done. Clinton had just gotten elected president. And candidly, University of Illinois offered me a scholarship, a tuition fee waiver, which reduced the cost tremendously. And that was why I chose U of I. It was only 2.5 hours from my home. It was in my home state. It had a great reputation back then. I think U of I was one of the top 20 law schools in the country. And so it was an easy choice. Now, of course, I had thought about wanting to go to school in Washington, D.C., because of the political climate there. I looked at Georgetown. I looked at Northwestern because I liked Chicago. But ultimately, I chose U of I primarily because of the tuition fee waiver that really made the cost quite affordable. And it was a solid legal education.
Yeah. How has an education from Illinois helped you in your career?
Well, it opened up a network of colleagues and professional that have been helpful to me in many ways. U of I has an excellent reputation, not just nationally, but specifically in the Midwest and here in Illinois. My first job in big law was because a classmate of mine worked at a law firm in Chicago that was interested in me. And so my law school classmate went to the partner of that firm at the time and got me an interview, and they hired me. So that relationship from U of I helped me get my first big law job. When I say big law, I mean large law firm. And those relationships over the years have helped me in my bar association activities and leadership growth and development, case referrals. I've made personal friends, not just from my class, but from over the years meeting other U of I alums, College of Law alums. I've developed new relationships that have become both personal and professional that still I'm blessed to have today.
Yeah, you kind of jokingly said you started your political career in Illinois, but you really did, as a law student, start a political career. You were elected to the West Aurora School Board while you were a student here?
So my third year in law school, in fall of 95, I ran for the West Aurora School Board. My classmates were extremely supportive. I'm going to get I'm going to miss some of the names. I'm going to make the mistake of calling names out because they're still dear friends of mine. But a group of my classmates had a fundraiser for me. They were at the time Odalie Desmuke. She's now Odalie Hawkins. She married a classmate from U of I. That classmate was Brent Hawkins, class of 97. He's a year behind us. Leslie Carey and Manuel Smith. I think Gretchen Gindi was part of that fundraiser, host committee. Maybe a brother named Damon Ellis might have been part of that. I have the invitation somewhere in my storage box now, over 30 years ago. But those friends and others put together an event to help me raise money for my campaign. And literally, Chris, I drove from Champaign back to Aurora, Illinois, once a month to attend school board meetings during the campaign. And in the fall of 95, I was elected. At the time, I was 25 years old and became the youngest member of the West Aurora School Board to be elected. And my classmates here helped make that happen. And so that was a glorious time, a good win. And that did start my political career. Again, I was trying to become president. That has not worked out as of today. And Obama took a different path and got there first.
And while you were here as well, you were getting a master's in education. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is this something that has been passion for you for a long time?
So I am a unique African-American person in this context. I'm a third-generation college graduate, and I'm 54 years old, and that's rare among my peers. Mm-hmm. My grandparents went to college. They were able to overcome the Jim Crow South and segregation, discrimination in Mississippi, where my parents are from, and my grandparents lived their life. But my grandmother went to Alcorn State University. My grandfather went to Jackson State. They both received master's degrees. They were both educators. My grandmother retired, and these are my mom's parents. Mm-hmm. My grandmother retired, my maternal grandmother retired as the assistant superintendent of her school district in Yazoo County, Mississippi. My grandfather was a middle school principal and sports coach. He coached football and basketball, I believe. Well, I mentioned that because I came from a family that valued education. And for my family, it wasn't if I was going to college, it was where. Mm-hmm. And so my parents are both college graduates. My mother has a master's degree as well. And so throughout my young adult life, and it was important to me to focus on my education. So when I came here to Champaign for law school, I was trying to think through what type of law or aspect of the law I wanted to focus on. And candidly, Chris, I was always more drawn to the public policy conversations on how we make law, how laws are made, how we put our values in our public policy, because public policy is a reflection of community values. And so the issue that I became most concerned about or interested in was education. And so the College of Ed was right across the street. And when I realized I could do a dual degree, I connected with a professor by the name of James Anderson over there at the College of Ed, who's a icon in the field of educational policy, a guy named William Trent. And there were a few others whose names slipped my mind today, but those two stood out. And I wanted to sit at their feet and learn. And so I did a master's degree in educational policy, which helped me on the school board, mm-hmm. which has also helped me frame my philosophy around how we shape and develop policy today. William Trent taught me this valuable lesson. He always raised this question. It's not what is in your self-interest, but what is in your enlightened self-interest. In other words, what do you value? What do you think about in terms of interest that is bigger than you, that may impact you later? And so I value those professors. It actually helped make law school a bit more enjoyable.
And now you're here Illinois College of Law, giving back, hopefully making some law students' time more enjoyable, teaching the history of the African-American lawyer in the United States. Why is that an important thing for you to do, to give back here at the College of Law?
Well, Chris, I think we all have seen over the last few years, particularly as we came out of the pandemic, there's been a significant pushback and resistance to history, particularly to African-American history. With the book banning attempts across the country, particularly in certain states like Florida and other states, I have taken it upon myself to do what I can to make sure that history is not lost, particularly the history of the Black community, and Black history in particular, and in this particular context, the history of Black lawyers. So since I'm a member of the legal community and I'm African American, I think the history of our contribution to the profession is critically important. And so I think it's important that history from all cultures are taught. The history of the Latino lawyer, of the Asian lawyer should be taught as well. But I come from a particular experience that I can bring to the conversation around African-American history. And so I believe if you don't know history, that's problematic. And I have seen too many people engage in debate and conversation without historical context. And so I think it's critically important that young law students and law students of the future understand the journey of the African-American lawyer, not only the journey, but then their relationship to the journey. And what they will often find is that the fights of 2025, the legal questions that are being raised in 2025, are not necessarily new, right? And so our newly elected president issued an executive order last week, or 2 weeks ago now, wanting to challenge the notion of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Well, it's important that students not only understand the 14th Amendment, but the historical context of the 14th Amendment and how that amendment was drafted to ensure that enslaved Africans who are now here in America and free were considered and counted as citizens. And so understanding that is relevant today. And so that's why I'm teaching the class. I'm honored that Dean Sharp and his team, his administrative team, have allowed me this opportunity. And I hope not only to teach it here, but I have a personal goal to do what I can to see if this type of course can be taught around the country and be put in the curriculum, because I think it's important that all students know the history of our profession in multiple contexts, mm-hmm. not just African-American, but especially in African-American, but in other contexts. Because candidly, if you study the history of the Black lawyer, you will quickly realize that often the progress of opening doors of opportunities, opening doors of equality and fairness and justice were led by African-American lawyers. And so our students are learning that in this class.
We don't have time to go through your whole curriculum, as interesting as it sounds, but I'm wondering, is there one aspect, perhaps an individual, a leader, that really stands out to you that is really enjoyable for you to teach and lecture on?
Well, I haven't taught on her yet because she's going to be in 2 weeks, I believe. But I've become more and more intrigued by the story of Ketanji Brown Jackson, mm-hmm. Our new relatively new Supreme Court justice. I cannot wait for our students to read about and learn about her story and her journey. When she speaks, she brings to the conversation historical context. She understands that she is in a continuum of African-American jurists that have paved the way for her. She mentions by name Constance Baker Motley, right? She references Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? And so her journey and her excellence, I'm not going to say Black excellence, and I said excellence intentionally because One of my big brothers in the law, who's a big law lawyer in Washington, D.C., he talks to Black lawyers about being excellent, not being Black excellence, as though that's kind of a category or a limitation. We should be excellent no matter where we are and who we are. And so for me, Justice Jackson represents excellence as a jurist. Her thoughtfulness, her intentionality in how she deliberates around making her decisions, but also her personal journey. And because I consider her a contemporary in terms of we're in the same generation. I mean, she finished Harvard Law, I believe, in 95. I finished here in 96. I have friends and colleagues who went to school with her. I hope to one day meet her. And when I look at her, I think about the fact that I was in early law school or about to start law school when Clarence Thomas went on the court. Here we are 30 plus years later, he's still there. I look at her and think to myself, she may be there for the rest of my lifetime. Or when she retires, I might be retiring too. So I see her as someone who I will get to see her life's experience on the court as a colleague, not just as a student, a young lawyer, but her decisions I will respond to, I will be impacted by as a colleague in the profession, a peer, if you will. So she's someone who I look forward to studying more in the student, because Clarence Thomas, for me, in terms of generationally, is Ketanji Brown Jackson for my students. When they're in their mid-50s, she may be retiring, right? And that's the only comparison I'm making between Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson. They have completely different judicial philosophies. I see them differently in the context of the story of the Black lawyer. But I'm just making the point that generationally, he's been there since I was here at U of I, and she may be there on the court when my current students, when they're talking to someone like you in 2054.
Crazy to think about, but
right. Or 55, I guess.
Yeah, like the justice, you've had a pretty storied career as well, and you've gotten a lot of awards, served in a lot of roles. I wrote a few of them down here. You're a top 100 trial lawyer from the National Black Lawyers Top 100. You've served as secretary of the National Conference of Bar Presidents, which puts you in line to be president of that group. Chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section, among many others. Is there anything that stands out to you as, you know, an award or an accomplishment or something you've done that's been a real highlight of your career?
Well, let me say this. One of my mentors I heard him say, and I've repeated it, that there's no greater honor that your peers can give you than to allow you to serve as president of their association, to be the voice of the profession, to be, in a jurist context, the Supreme Court talks about the Chief Justice as a first among equals, right? To be the president of a bar association or chair of a section, your peers are entrusting you to be their voice, to be their leader. So I've been honored, as you noted, multiple times to serve in multiple roles. I'm wearing my National Bar Association pin today as a life member, and I was truly honored to serve as the 75th president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest association of Black lawyers, judges in the country. I'm wearing this pin in part because I'm teaching today, of course, but I'm also celebrating the 100th anniversary of the NBA's founding in 1925. So that's been something I've always been honored by, and it's special to me. But I'll tell you, what I am most humbled by, what I am most pleased by, is when a fellow lawyer, a colleague, refers a case to me. Because that is even more than just being our voice. You're telling a potential client that you can't serve for whatever reason, and that you should call Juan Thomas. He can help you. And so When I get a call from a potential client and they say, we were referred to you by another lawyer who I'm in a relationship with, I always cherish that and don't take that for granted, because all of us as lawyers, and I would say this to my students, all of us will know other lawyers, okay? And whether you're involved in bar work or civic work or not, you're going to develop a reputation in your community where you practice, in the region of the country, in your state, or nationally. And you hope your colleagues think enough of you to bring your name up when you're not in the room. And I always tell my students this: relationships are critically important. And once you've established a level of competency in the practice, once you've kind of mastered your craft, the next question is, are you in a relationship with other lawyers and colleagues who think well of you? Because everybody's smart. You got a law degree, right? The next question is, do I like you? And if I don't like you, guess what? You may be a good lawyer, but I'm not going to refer a case to you. That's just human nature. I'm not here to debate the rights or wrong of that. I just know the instinctive nature of people. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell people this, my students this: if you're the best lawyer in town and no one likes you, but everybody knows you're the best lawyer in town, when I need to refer someone to a lawyer, guess what I'm probably going to do? I'm going to refer them to the second best lawyer in town. And I will tell you, you've mentioned some of my leadership opportunities that I've had the pleasure to serve in. Most of them have been ultimately because of a relationship. I became chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section because I developed a relationship with a colleague when I was the National Bar Association president, who admired my work and admired my leadership. And he's a lawyer out of San Diego, California, who pulled me aside and said, Juan, I think you'd be a good leader for this section of the ABA. He was at the time the immediate past chair. His name is Will Schooley, out of San Diego, still a dear friend of mine. And he helped me get in line to become a leader in the ABA. I'm the treasurer now of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. I got there because, yes, people observe my skill set and my leadership, but I have two dear friends who kept encouraging me to stay involved in that organization. I applied twice to be on the council of NCBP. It's called NCBP for short. And I was denied. My third time, I applied because a colleague out of Chicago named Aurora Austriaco, was a very good lawyer out of Chicago and was president, was going to become president at the time, told me to apply one more time. And her and another friend who was on the council at the time named Dan Cotter said, apply, and we'll make sure you get in. I got in. And now I'm on that trajectory. Again, Will, Aurora, and Dan know a lot of lawyers. They know a lot of people. They know a lot of other good leaders. I'm not going to pretend to suggest that I'm the smartest lawyer they know or even the best leader they know. But we had a relationship. We were friends, and they thought I could be of service. But ultimately, they liked me, and they gave me a chance. And that's what's important.
Well, Dr. Thomas, thank you very much. I've taken up enough of your time, I think. But I want to thank you for coming in and doing the podcast. Thank you for all that you bring to the College of Law, teaching the class, and just being part of our alumni network. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Thank you again to Dr. Thomas for joining me on the podcast. Thanks to our listeners as well for making the podcast part of your day. If there is a person or topic you would like to hear more about on the Illinois LawCast, please send an email to podcast@law.illinois.edu. The Illinois LawCast is available on all major podcast platforms, and video episodes are available on YouTube. This episode was recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Chris Davies. Special thanks to Kelly Moss for our album art and Krista Getke for her help in the editing process. Until next time, thanks again for listening to the Illinois LawCast.